Hello, what's up? My name is Jade and today I'm going to be talking about my September reads. The first book that I read in September was the third book in the Shatter Me series, which is Ignite Me. This was a fun book. I'm not going to talk about it because I'm not going to talk too much about the story because this is the third book and that would spoil the other books. What I will say is that this book felt like it almost could have been the last book. Like after finishing this book, I feel like I'm done with the series. It's a fun series. It's not a series that holds a really special place in my heart, but it was fun to read and it's very easy to read. There's not a whole lot of, I don't know, I feel like there's not a whole lot going on that you have to pay like really close attention. I don't think the writing is anything spectacular. It's just a fun book, and I think there are more books in this series. There's a lot of them, but some of them are novellas, which I read one, and I think I'm just not gonna read any more novellas, and I just don't know if I'm gonna continue with the series right now. I think there are just better books. That's how I feel. I feel like this is okay, but there's so many good books that I want to read that I'm not super excited to like continue this series. Once I finished this book, I was like, okay, I'm good. I'm finished with the series. But that was the first book that I read. It was a really easy read, like I said, and it's a good book. I don't think it's a 5-star, but it's fun. The next book I read is absolutely a 5-star. It is Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. I'm going through all of Riley Sager's books. So far, I think this is my favorite one. House Across the Lake. I feel like these are tied, but this book was so good. Honestly, every Riley Sager book that I've read has been good. I just really enjoyed this one. If you hear a little bell, Batsy is playing with her little bell toy. So I'll read the summary for this book. Batsy knows I have her toy. I took it from her. I'll give it back to her, but she knows I have it. And the thing is, if I put it somewhere, she'll go find it. She follows me. In this book, we're following Jules, who gets a job house sitting a very extravagant apartment in Manhattan called the Bartholomew. And it's like too good to be true. She's getting paid a lot of money to basically live in this extravagant apartment very close to Central Park, but she is broke, she needs the money and a place to live. So she takes the job, even though her friend's kind of like, well, this is weird that they're paying you to like live in this apartment and not have to, like you just have to live there. That's weird. So she takes the job, and another house sitter in that apartment building goes missing, and she wants to find out what happened to her. All of the house sitters that are in this apartment building are all similar. Like they don't have family or a lot of people in their life. They're all broke, so they take the job. Like there are things that she's starting to piece together, like why did this person go missing? What's going on? Yeah, so things start to happen in that apartment building and she's uneasy about it. And that's like all I'm gonna say because I don't want to give anything away, but it's such a good book, so good and so atmospheric. Like this book takes place, I think, in November, and she lives like Central Park. She can see it from her window. So just like how the atmosphere or like the place is described is very nice, very atmospheric. So I regret buying it in paperback. I feel like for my Riley Sager collection, I'm gonna have to buy this in hardcover one day, because now any book that I buy from Riley Sager, I'm buying in hardcover so that they're all the same size. I also love the color of this book, but super good, 5-star, definitely recommend. I also read that book in like 2 days or something like that, because his books are so fast paced. Like you can't put down a Riley Sager book because you have to find out what happens. So I just wanted to say that about that book. The next book that I read was Queen of Nothing. This is the third book in the Cruel Prince series. It's such a good book. All these books are really good. I'm not gonna really talk about the book again because this is the last book in the series and that would totally spoil the other books. But I recommend this series. It's so good. We're following Jules, she's a human who lives in Fairy, and so much happens in this book. It is also a very political book. There's a lot of politics, a lot of pieces moving around in this book, and Jules enjoys that aspect of, you know, the kingdom and just a part of being in fairy, how political it is. I do think that the political part of this series can throw people off because it can be a lot, but I personally really liked that, and I think that these books were really exciting. There were so many scenes or so many parts in all 3 books where I was like, what just happened? Oh my goodness, like very shocked. There were many shocking scenes in this series, and I loved that. Lots of heart-gripping scenes. It's just gives you all these feelings. And I love when a book makes me feel like very connected to the characters. I cried at the end of this book because I was so like sad that it was over. I think all of these books are 5 stars. The series is just really good, and I know a lot of people loved it, and this is a really, really good series. It's better than Shatter Me, for sure. The next book I have very mixed feelings about. I feel like I still don't know how to rate this book. I bought this book on a whim. I've never heard anyone talk about this book. I really liked the cover and I liked the first few pages, and that is Feed by Myra Grant. Now, this book is deceiving because it is a zombie book, and the first chapter, they're like running, the 2 characters, the brother and sister, they're running away from zombies. So it seemed really exciting. And then all of this, it's all politics. It's a very political book. It's not boring, but this book just needed so much more zombie scenes. Now, I really liked the author's writing. I think I went into this book wanting a horror thriller, and that's not what this is, even though it has zombies. We're following Georgia and Sean, brother and sister. They're news reporters. This is in the future. There are zombies, but the whole zombie situation is under control. People have to get like their blood drawn to go anywhere. There are different areas where the zombie situation is more in control than others. They're like districts, I guess. And there are some areas where like it's fine to have your kids play outside and it's all safe, and then there are areas where like no one is allowed, and if you go into that area you get shot on sight. But reporters they have like special clearance. They can go into certain areas to do their reporting, and they always carry weapons with them. They're like rock stars, the reporters at this time. And there are 3. There's Georgia, there's Sean, and then there's their friend, and they all have different jobs. Our main character, Georgia, is like facts. She reports facts about what's going on in the world. Sean, her brother, posts things about like, he's like a daredevil and he likes to like taunt zombies, and it's very exciting, and people watch his portion of the news, their reports, for like the thrill of it. And then our other character, she is like the fictional writer, and she writes like romance and like fictional stuff about the zombies, but they're all part of a team. They get hired by a man running for president to follow his campaign, and that's a really large portion of this book, is them on the campaign with him, reporting stuff. This book I had to force myself to pick up. It was not a book that I was like really excited to keep reading. I loved the first few chapters, how she described everything, like the zombies are really cool, like how you become a zombie, like all those details were very thorough, and I loved learning about them. Like it's like really easy to turn into a zombie. You can't shoot a zombie that's super close to you, because if any of their like blood gets on you, then you turn into a zombie. So it's more difficult to kill them. And there are also zombies, like different stages of being a zombie. Like if a zombie turns in front of you, they don't automatically look like a zombie. They look like a person, and they're called like the fresh zombies, and people will mistake them for normal people, and that's like a big danger. And they're also very fast, whereas like the longer you're a zombie or a person is a zombie, the slower they get. And it's just, I found all that interesting, but then we're just following a campaign for like a lot of this book. And there's stuff going on during that time, but not zombie stuff. Like the zombies are kind of like the background. However, there is a part of this book that like got me. Could not believe one of these scenes. I was like, Oh my gosh. Like, I kept thinking about it for like days. This like scene that was so, oh my goodness. So for that, this book really shocked me. Like the whole, I don't want to say what happens at all, but like a whole portion of the book, I was like, what? It gripped you really well. So I think this book could have been shorter and could have had more zombies. I haven't lost faith in this author because I did buy another book by her that I'm actually waiting for in the mail, because she was really good at making me feel things and I liked her characters. It just was too long and not enough zombies. So I still feel like I don't know what to rate this, but that was Feed. There are more books. This is like a series, but this I feel could be a standalone book. I'm not gonna continue the series, but I've had to sit with this book and I still don't know what to rate it. Just could have been shorter and needed more zombies. The next book I also had a difficult time with. That was Bone Keeper, The Bone Keeper. This, let me read. I didn't even read the summary for the other one. I feel like I explained it pretty. I'm gonna read the back of this. 20 years ago, 4 teenagers went exploring in the local woods, trying to find the supposed home of the Bone Keeper. Only 3 returned. Now a woman is found wandering the streets, horrifically injured, claiming to have fled the evil urban myth. And then a body turns up. This is a horror thriller. There's the Bone Keeper. Everyone in this area knows about the Bone Keeper. It's a myth. Some people think it's real, but a woman like escapes the woods and claims that the Bone Keeper captured her, tortured her, and she escaped. So we're following detectives that are trying to find the Bone Keeper, and they come along, like they have to explore the woods and they find like more bodies in the woods, and they're trying to find him basically. And then higher ups come and it becomes a really big investigation. But we don't know if the Bone Keeper is a normal person or this creature that kind of pops up every once in a while. So this story is interesting and gross. It was interesting. I felt very disconnected from the characters in this book. I had a hard time feeling things with this book. I think that's what was so tough, is that I did not like how it was written. It would like change perspectives within the same chapter and I would be so confused. I'd be like, wait a second, whose mind am I in right now? It would change from like the male detective to the female detective without like a big enough, like it wouldn't tell us that we were switching minds. So like the perspective change was confusing, and then we would switch into other characters in different chapters. And I understand that a big part of this book is that you're supposed to be confused, but I was really confused. So I don't think it was a bad book. I just wasn't a very big fan of how it was written, and I just wish I felt more connected to the characters in the book. I felt very disconnected and I didn't like that. I felt like I didn't care what happened to the characters, and that's not how you should feel. It was also not the most fast-paced book. It was interesting though. I mean, I didn't dislike it, but I expected more from this book. I do like the investigation aspect of it, but I just could not connect with these characters. So I'm having a difficult time rating this one as well. So I had a hard time picking up Feed, and then I felt like I kind of had to force myself to read this one too. So it's not a super great like week of reading, but that was the next book that I read. The next book that I read, don't read this book. That is Tender is the Flesh. Now, if you like disturbing books that will gross you out, you'll never forget what you read, then this is the book for you. This book is so gross. I did not expect for this book to be this disgusting. And I knew this was gonna be a difficult book. Like, this is not for the weak of heart. Like, people say, you know, that it's a hard read, and it is. We're following Marcos, who works at a processing plant, and what's being processed are humans, but they're not called humans in this future. They are food. And everything that livestock, you know, goes through, slaughtering, all that, but humans. In the start of this book, he's taking 2 potential employees through the facility to see which one's gonna stick it out, and he describes everything in the slaughterhouse. And I mean, it's a lot to take in. As the book continues, you just go deeper into like what humans are now treated as. And they're not, like, these humans are being like genetically modified, so they don't talk. It's hard to talk about. Humans no longer have like hair, their skin, like there are different humans for different purposes. But basically in this future, there's a disease. It's been a while since I read this. There's a disease that made all poultry, all like meat, inedible. You can't eat it anymore. But people still need protein, and that was what the media was pushing, that like we need protein or we're gonna die, and people, or maybe not die, but become like really not good for you. So people started to freak out, and they wanted a different source of protein, and that's where special meat came from, and that is, you know, human meat. And there are different like grades of meat, of special meat. And our character, Marcos, does not enjoy his job. But we don't really like this character either. It's not like he's completely innocent, but he's not really fond of what happens. And some people are way worse than others with the handling of the meat. So this book is not a book that you want to read. I could not eat food and read this book. Like, I like to eat my lunch and read. I could not eat. It felt wrong to eat food and read this book at the same time. It was so gross. The book itself was written very well. Like, it keeps your attention and the whole thing is very interesting and very detailed. Like, I think the author is very talented, I guess, but the story itself is just awful. And I think a lot of the message behind this book is good. Just, I did not need to read this to receive that message. But it's commenting on like how we believe what we're told from media, and how we're so easily swayed to do things that, you know, can be horrific, and just like mankind and how evil man is and how desperate man is for things. Well, in the book, they're desperate for food, uncontrollable hunger of human desires, I guess. I don't doubt that the messages behind this book are good, and that the author is very good at, you know, making you feel things and being very descriptive so that you feel like you can see everything. But I think I've learned that I don't like disturbing books. This is the first book in like I don't think disturbing is a genre, but like in the horror but very disturbing sub-genre, I don't think I'm a fan, because I'll never be able to forget what I read, and it was very awful. To the very end, it's horrific. And when I finished this, I was like, oh my God, this is such a bad book. And I don't like disturbing things, so I don't know why I thought I would like this. I just didn't think it would be that intense, and it is. So I don't know if I described the story very well. So we're following Marcos. He works at the plant, and we're just kind of following him and his wife. They're like separated, trying to like make that work. And basically he's given a gift of a very special specimen, this woman, and he's starting to see her less as, I mean, they're treated like animals, they're livestock, and he's starting to see her differently. And he doesn't really know what to do with her. So that's what we're following, him and this woman. I thought it was gonna go a different route, and I was very wrong. But that was Tender as the Flesh. It is a short read. If you like disturbing, gross, very graphic books, this would be the book for you, but it is not the book for me. After reading 3 books that I didn't really like, for different reasons, I was like, I need something fun and stupid and lighthearted and this may not be the most lighthearted book, but I read CRAVE by Tracy Wolff. Now, CRAVE is supposed to be like Twilight, even the covers are similar, and the story is similar. I started this book a while back and just wasn't in the mood for the book, but I always kind of had it in the back of my mind that like, oh, I want to try to read the CRAVE series. I will say I really like the cover and that the pages are, there's a word, I can never remember what it's called, but they have like texture, they're all different lengths. And I know people don't like that. I really like that. I'm gonna read the inside cover to explain this book. My whole world changed when I stepped into the academy. Nothing is right about this place or the other students in it. Here I am, a mere mortal among gods or monsters. I still can't decide which of these factions I belong to, if I belong at all. I only know the one thing that unites them is their hatred of me. Then there's Jackson Vega, a vampire with deadly secrets who hasn't felt anything for 100 years. But there's something about him that calls to me, something broken in him that somehow fits with the broken in me, which can spell death for us all. Because Jackson walled himself off for a reason, and now someone wants to wake a sleeping monster, and I'm wondering if I was brought here intentionally as the bait. It's not a complete retelling of Twilight. It's funny, even in the book, she's reading Twilight. It's a very funny book, and the writing is funny. I really enjoyed it, but we're following Grace, who goes to this academy, so it does feel very like gothic. And basically there are vampires, there are monsters, but what's different from Twilight is that in Twilight there are vampires and werewolves, and in this book, there are dragons, there are werewolves, there are vampires, witches, there are more paranormal creatures, monsters, people in this book, so I found that interesting. And in the school, you know, they're all it's a private school, they all have their cliques, like, you know, the witches stay together, the vampires, the werewolves, and then Grace is a human and she doesn't know where she fits in. And then there's Jackson Vega, who's the vampire, and he kind of sees himself as he sees their story as like Bella and Edward. And Grace, for the longest time, doesn't know what's happening in this school. It takes her forever to figure it out. But it was really fun. And I read and listened to this book, and when I got close to the end, I was thinking that this book would be it. Like I wasn't gonna continue with this series. Like I got what I wanted from it. But then at the very end, the ending was really good, so I want to continue the series. I do think this is very much kind of a dumb book, but fun. And after reading terrible, horrific books, I really wanted to read something kind of dumb. So I already have the next one on my shelf ready to read. It's a fun book, it's lighthearted, and this story's pretty good. It's not a retelling of Twilight. They are similar though. So that was the next book that I read. The next book has to be one of my favorite books I've read all year. I did a reading vlog of this book, and that's Fourth Wing. This book was so good. I'm not gonna go super in depth because I have a reading vlog of me reading this book. It was 5 stars. Oh my gosh. This is as heart gripping, like it has a special place in my heart, like Divergent and The Hunger Games. Like that is where this book is like ranked for me. The second book comes out in November. I need to pre-order it. That was actually something I was gonna do this weekend. I need to pre-order that book because I'm so excited to read it. This is a high fantasy, very exciting, fast-paced book. There are dragons and dragon riders. There's a big competition. Our main character is very weak at the beginning of the book, and she becomes really strong, and she's really cool, and there is a love connection with another dragon rider. The whole book, it's so gripping. Like the entire book, I was not bored at all. So many chapters left with a cliffhanger. You had to find out what happened. There are battle scenes and cool competitions. I loved this book. I had such a fun time reading this book. And I know that everyone loved this book, so I'm not gonna talk too much about it. Go watch my reading vlog if you want in-depth and kind of my reactions as I'm reading the book. But loved. I feel like this kind of brought me back after reading those books. I mean, Crave kind of got me out of my reading slump, and then this was like, oh, this is why I love reading. I'm so excited for the next book. I cannot wait. But yeah, go watch my reading vlog. After I finished Fourth Wing, I had a few days left in September, so I decided to go to Barnes & Noble and pick a short book. I didn't do any research. I just wanted to kind of browse and find a book. And the book that I got was The Things Between Us by Gus Moreno. This book. I love the cover, and I've picked up this book before thinking it looked interesting. On the back it says, a startling, darkly funny horror novel about grief and rage, the loneliness of living between cultures, and the all too real oppressive intimacy of technology. This book is kind of hard to describe. It's a very dark and sad book. In the beginning of this book, we're following Tiago. He's at his wife's funeral. And throughout the whole book, he's talking to her like she's still alive. Like, kind of parts of it are like him remembering and talking to her like, do you remember this? And then things that are happening, he's like telling her about it. I was reading this book and had to like put it down because it made me want to cry. Like, it's really sad. It is a horror. I don't understand how in the back it says that it's funny. Like, a few other reviews also said it was funny. I don't think this book is funny at all. Basically, death has followed Tiago throughout his whole life. He's just kind of been, I don't know, unlucky, I guess. But he falls in love, and her death had to do with technology, with an Alexa, basically. But they don't call it that in the book. And they buy this house, and weird things happen in this house. And their Alexa, I forgot what they, oh, she heard me, is like haunted. Like, things keep happening that are weird, and they decide that they just need to get rid of it because it's kind of intrusive and it's like ordering things for them. It's odd. I was trying to find a part of the book that like made me emotional. I can't find it. I should have like highlighted it. But basically, Tiago is saying, you know, life is a book that I don't really want to keep reading because the main character is dead. Like, the love of his life is dead. But it was said so much better than that. So it's sad. He's just super like engulfed with grief and rage and doesn't really know what to do. So he gets money through insurance. Somehow he gets a lot of money from like his wife passing away, which he doesn't like. He feels like it's wrong to get money from his wife's death, but he decides to buy a house in Colorado and just kind of live his life there alone. He doesn't really know what to do with himself. He doesn't really need to work anymore. He has money. He doesn't really have a lot of friends. Like, all their friends were her friends, and he really starts to dislike people because everyone's grieving about her, and he's just kind of like, she was my person. Like, you all are fake, and pretending to be grieving her, and like you really knew her, but you didn't. And family is trying to get his money, you know, kind of making him feel guilty about it, and like he owes them that money. So he buys a nice house and lives in Colorado. And weird things start to happen there too. Like, weird things happened at the house that they lived in together, and then in Colorado, weird things start to happen. And he finds, oh, my lights turned off. And he finds a dog. That's why there's a dog on the cover. Things happen with the dog too. Sad things. I was not prepared for that either. But something about this book is that it's supposed to be very confusing. He has nightmares, like nightmares all the time. So we're confused as to what is a nightmare and what's actually really happening. Like, weird, crazy, gross things are happening, and you're just like, is he dreaming this, or is this actually happening to him? After I finished the book, I wanted to understand it more. I think that's something I have to do with some books. Like, I don't feel like I truly understood everything. So I watched a video of Gus Moreno and Jeff Vandermeer doing an interview together, and I was like, oh, it makes sense that like Jeff Vandermeer and this guy would be in like the same interview. Like, Jeff Vandermeer is a part of the horror and weird like subgenre. This guy had I got similar feelings from this book with a Jeff Vandermeer book that I read, where you just don't really know what's real. You don't know what's really happening, and it's also there are horror aspects to it, so it's like scary. So I enjoyed learning more about that, but I just don't think that weird books are my style either. I feel like I learned a lot from this month, that I don't like disturbing books, and I also just don't enjoy the weird, confusing kind of books. But it was a really good book. I mean, this book made me want to cry. It was like very heart gripping and sad, and the story was interesting, but man, until the end, like throughout the whole book, you feel so bad for this guy. And I think this is maybe one of the saddest books that I've read, where I literally had to put it down because I was like, this book is making me cry. But I just still feel like I still don't really know what happened. But I know some people enjoy that in a book, and I think I like to feel more clear. I don't like that fevered, dreamish feeling in a book. I just want to know the facts. I want to know what actually happened and not be so confused. This month I feel very confused as to like what to rate some of these books, because like I do think this was a good book, but I would not want to read it again, and I don't know that I would necessarily recommend it to people, but it did make me feel things, which is something I want from a book. I don't like when I finish a book and I'm like, I'm gonna forget that book, or I didn't feel anything. Like, this book will stick with me because it was so sad, but I don't think this was a 5-star book. Just like Tender is the Flesh, I mean, that book made me feel things. Horrible, horrible book, but it was really well written. So I feel confused as to what to rate books these days. At least for the month of September, it was a confusing month. But yeah, this was the last book that I read in September. This is my reading stack for September. It was, for the most part, a good reading month. I read 9 books. And I enjoyed most of them, but I just feel like I learned things in the month of September. Books that I don't enjoy, or like subgenres that I don't enjoy. But I did read some really good books. So it was a good month of reading, especially Fourth Wing and Lock Every Door. Thanks for hanging out with me while I talk about my September reads. I would love it if you could subscribe and like my video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.